hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, and my wonderful wife is busy working at the pharmacy. So she will be back on the show Monday at 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. So make sure you don't miss that. And I am super excited to have Kelli Pearson on our show today. She is a chiropractor in Spokane, Washington. I had the privilege of meeting her last fall, I believe, and learning about her beliefs and also about her book. I met her at a medical freedom conference, and her book is 8 Minutes to Ageless. And as you can tell, she's been following that principle. So Kelli, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Shawn. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very impressed with the work you've been doing over these past 2 decades or so.
Yeah, well, thank you for those kind words. And I appreciate what you do. And I think what's really interesting is that, as you probably know, pharmacists and chiropractors are usually on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Chiropractors are totally anti-drug. And what's really interesting is over the last 2 decades is Janet and I have gotten to be good friends with many chiropractors, and we believe kind of the same thing as most chiropractors. We're two pharmacists that don't believe in drugs to treat long-term disease. So
Right.
I really respect what chiropractors do, because part of it is you guys have to get to the root of the problem and actually fix it, because you can't prescribe drugs that treat symptoms.
That's right. It's funny, in every profession, starting from massage to PT to chiro to medical docs to surgeons, there's that small faction on one side that wants to take to next level. And I've been involved in national politics for a long time, and there's a teeny weeny bit of chiropractors that want to prescribe medication. And we're like, no,
Yeah.
please, because we're generally a very nice group of people. And you could imagine it would be hard to say no to a patient who is in horrible pain, who wants yet another dose of hydroxy cotton or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But more importantly, we're forced to find ways to strategically mitigate pain. Now, not to say I don't use MDs and go, whoa, I need something to help with this vertigo, or whoa, can I have a steroid dose pack because I can't even touch this patient? But if you give him that, I'll be able to do the mobilization I need, right? So there's room for all of us. We just have to do it in the most intelligent fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you bring up that story, because Janet and I met with an MD doctor the other day, and he was working in a chiropractor's office. He's got a functional medicine practice inside a chiropractor's office. And this chiropractor we had just met this guy, so we weren't going to debate with him, but he was talking how there's some talk about chiropractors prescribing drugs, and you kind of hope it goes that way. And I'm like you, it's like, no, you really don't want that. And I
Right.
was taught by actually the first chiropractor we ever had on our podcast a few years ago, a local Moses Lake guy. He says one of the benefits that chiropractors have is they can't prescribe drugs, so they've
Right.
got to fix the problem. And
Yeah.
I totally respect that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your history
Okay.
before chiropractor school, after chiropractor school, during, all that good stuff.
Sure. I had kind of a tumultuous way into chiropractic college. I knew I wanted to touch people to heal them, and I was a UCLA grad, had to figure out what that looked like. I thought PT, and I got accepted to PT school, and that didn't work out. In my mind, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I went to massage school, and 45 years ago, 50 years
Wow.
ago, massage school was a little dicey. That wasn't it. I studied acupressure. That was interesting, but that wasn't it. I was told by my dad chiropractors were quacks, so I never even looked at it. And then one day, through the grace of God, I'm walking down the street of Santa Monica, and I meet a chiropractor, and he says, "Hey, do you want to watch me work?" I'm like, okay. So we walked to his office. I watched him work on 2 people, and I was, whoa, that's what I want to do. And took me a couple years for my dad to invite me back to home for dinner when I started chiropractic school shortly thereafter. But through the grace of God, once again, he developed back pain, and the only body that could help him was some of the chiropractors at my my university. So
Wow.
it all worked out. So as a result of my trying to include all these different disciplines, I've been extremely focused on cooperation. So I refer out to every different type of discipline I can think of when it's appropriate. And I think it's all of our jobs to know what we do well, and more importantly, what other people do well. Because if you can't make the proper referral and you're going to soak the system and treat this patient 10 times and get no results, what's the point of that, right? So I much rather say, I'd love to care for you, but you're going to be better cared for over here. Let's do that. And people appreciate that. And plus, you have a busier practice when people know that you put their interest before yours. So that's been my husband, who is my partner, fabulous guy, Dr. Dana Weary. We've been together in practice for 45 years now, and during this time we've raised, I think, 10 associates. We forgot to have kids, so we have associates, and we've trained them in these principles of taking care of people first, always adding to your tool bag, making sure that you're not hanging on to old principles that have been replaced with evidence-based medicine. So that's where we're at. But as I approached my Medicare age, and a lot of my patients have grown old with me. I'm now 68, and so I thought, oh, good Lord, people have just lost their minds about how to take care of these fabulous things called our human body. It's like they forgot to read the owner's manual. Oh, I guess there hasn't been an owner.
Right.
And people don't understand how to minimally care for their body so that they have ongoing range of motion. I talk, Shawn, about something called a gravitational footprint. It's that distance from your mid back, the tip of your mid back in a kyphotic situation, and you draw a line that way, and it comes, and then you draw a line in the front of your nose, and the distance at the top becomes your gravitational footprint. So if you have like your gravitational footprint gets bigger, right? And let me tell you, gravity takes full advantage of that. So it causes even more excessive proclivity for this increased curve in your mid back. And that's no bueno, because we now know that when the brain is positioned forward of the spinal cord, the thing that it controls, the spine, when the brain is in a constant anterior posture, we now call that digital dementia. And digital is like,
Yeah.
so you're getting these 18-year-olds developing the same postural distortion than their grandparents. The grandparent got there because he's worked hard and didn't stretch and didn't think about an
Yeah.
erect posture, and they're
Posture,
getting
yeah.
there because of this
Yeah.
on the phone. So we know that people actually are losing cognitive capacity with crappy posture. Wow. That's hard to believe, but it's true, and it's being discussed more and more. So I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Well, it's just, I mean, here we are. Here I am in a podcast, leaned over like this.
Yeah, but
And
you're
it's just
leaned over at your hips. You're not
yeah,
just
true,
you're not
true.
just here. So
It's just a reminder how posture is so important. I mean,
yes. And so I tell people constantly people go, how do I sit up straight? Well, I'll teach them how to stretch and work with the ligaments. I'll talk about that in a sec. But moreover, I just say, think about this one thing: lead with your heart. And when you lead with your heart, right away, your shoulders go back, your spine becomes more erect if it can. Now, if you've been so hunkered over for so long, the ligaments have shortened, then you can't just pop up, right? But I tell people to lead with their heart, and instantly that brings them more erect if they can. We'll again speak to that. And interestingly enough, when you lead with your heart, let's say you open a door to a room and you maybe don't know anybody on the inside. When you lead with your heart, you open the door and all of a sudden you're more interested in them and curious about them. When you lead with your head, you kind of get into this fear-based pose. You open the door and now you're more interested in, what do they think about me? Right?
yeah,
So we want to show up this way in life for lots of good reasons. We stay healthier, and we don't want to lose our mind.
yeah,
But there's another part of what I'm trying to get at in the book, and that is our actual cognitive capacity is defined by the collective range of motion of every single joint in the body. So let's say you break your little toe and you don't do anything about it. You kind of create a funky way of walking. And over time, that becomes a habit. You've lost in that joint this amazing proprioceptive capacity to know where that joint is in time and space. And when I'm able to move my finger around in all these directions, I'm sending a tremendous amount of data to my motor cortex and my sensory cortex. If I now have a fused joint or a broken toe that doesn't move, or a disc herniation in the past that I just learned to deal with by not moving, you know, I'm good as long as I don't rotate my head. This collective loss of range of motion in the body makes us stupid too. And so I tell people, look, you're in New York City, you got to get on the train. You don't know exactly where it is. You know it's leaving any minute. So you see two men in the crosswalk, and they're dressed nicely. You know they got a nice sports jacket on and some nice shoes. So you know they have some financial means. Let's say one of them is kyphotic, humped over, and kind of looking down, and the other is more erect. And you're in a hurry. Where's C Street? Who are you going to ask? Which of those two guys are you going to ask?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's obvious. You're going to ask the guy who's more erect. A, you're assuming he's going to be a little smarter. He's been looking around. He knows where he is in time and space. This guy's been looking at his feet. And likely the guy who's humped over has crappy hearing. So you might have to repeat your question twice. So we are drawn to people who have more erect postures. We trust them more. We know they can hear us. We know they can cognitively receive what we're trying to get at. And yet, do we talk about that very much? No.
No.
No, it's like this unspoken thing, and it's so weird. So I say, let's spend the minimum amount of time to take care of the body we do have. And so, the 8 minutes piece was really important to me because I'm a minimalist. I'm going to take the best care of my body I can, but I'm not going to spend 2 hours a day doing it.
Yeah.
I will commit to spending a certain amount of time, but I don't have 2 hours. Maybe when I retire someday, that'll be possible, but that's not the case. So 2 things. How do I teach people to stretch their muscles and myofascia, and then how do I get them to stretch their ligaments? We don't talk about ligaments very much, but we should. So I have this thing called a 2-bounce protocol. There's 12 different movements where you're moving into these cardinal ranges of motion that if you're able to do all these cardinal ranges of motion, like bending forward, bending back, bending to the side, your arms up in all types of postures, your knees up in all types of postures, and you do this every day, and it takes 4 minutes. Why would you not be able to do it when you're 90?
Yeah.
There's no good reason, except for maybe if you got hit by a truck and you got a rehab. But I will tell people, look, if you're traumatized and you have a bad thing happen to you, don't just accept it. Get out there and fight, because you can regain that, and you can't generally do it only by yourself. You need the help of medical practitioners. So I have this 2-bounce protocol, and it's actually on the web on my book, 8minutesageless.com. You can scroll down to the different chapters, and where it says 2-bounce, you can watch me do the motion. Yeah.
Where's that at, Kelly? I've got your website up.
If you scroll down now on the site, like there's the video for the gravity-assisted ligamentous stretching. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
That one's a sit to stand right underneath that. Which is a great test. I have my dog there helping me out. If you can stand up from the ground with your knees bent without touching the ground, you're winning.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
winning. And then this next one here is the 2-bounce protocol. So people can watch what I talk about in the book on this is the dural stretch. So I do a lot of in the book, I have lots of different chapters for different tissues that need to be said hello to, basically. And again, with the with the hope of not spending too much time to get that done.
Well,
Yeah.
Here's what I just some commentary. It's really, we want to make things so complicated when it comes to exercise, and you never even mentioned the word exercise, I don't think.
No.
But really, and exercise can be a 4-letter word to some people.
Yes.
It can, and I don't think any of us really, we like the results of it, but exercise can be maybe scary, but really, it's just about movement. That's really all it is. And basically, from what I see, from what you're showing, is you're showing basic movements, and like you say, the things that incapacitate us as we get older is basically one of the last things that goes is, or maybe the first thing before we totally decline, is our inability to walk, or at least walk without a
Yes.
cane, or walk without a walker, or walk without, or be put in a wheelchair. And so the longer we can stay mobile, the longer we're probably going to live. Those are just facts, right?
You were absolutely right. And one of the protocols in my 2 bounce, one of the 12 things, is to stretch the calf. Because if the muscles on the back of your leg are tight, that determines a shuffle. You can only bring your leg forward to the degree you have flexibility in
Right.
your calf muscles, right? And so what happens is when these people lose that flexibility, then they shuffle. They have not the wide base of support. And what happens is they fall. And we know this, that when older people fall, they break a leg, they throw a clot, they have a stroke, you
It's a
know,
yeah.
it's just a bad sequence of events for
Yeah.
sure. So in the book, I try to explain why when you stretch this, you're going to prevent this. And folks just don't get this whole cool thing about the body, that the front and the back and the sides have to be honored to the same degree. I use this example of, in the 2 bounce protocol, we have lots of different ranges of motion in the shoulder. But we have this group of muscles called the rotator cuff.
Mhm.
And it's called a cuff because it looks like a sleeve, because there's 4 muscles, the top and the front and the back and kind of underneath, and those are 4 rotator cuff muscles. And when they're all playing well, i.e. not too tight from an injury, or not too weak because you've forgotten to strengthen it, and when they're all playing well together, you have this beautiful, what we call circumduction. Like, the humerus, your arm bone, is happily moving around the fossa of the scapula that is engaging it. And it's like, happy, happy, happy. Now you get one of those muscles either too tight or hurt, weak, and now instead of this nice what we call centration, centralized, now it's up here or here or I mean, that's exaggerated, of course. But now you go to move it, it's like, oh gosh, darn it. I must have a labral tear. I must have a rotator cuff tear. I've got to see a surgeon. Like, please don't go there first. Yes, you may have some tears, you may have some tendon challenges, you may have a labral upset. All of that may be true. But if you can get more flexible and then start to strengthen the pieces that are missing, 9 times, I'm going to be so bold as to say, excuse my dogs in the background, 9 times out of 10, you're going to recover yourself to a very, very large degree where you're functional again. But we give up too soon,
Yeah.
And we
No,
have that same thing going on
agree.
in our hips too, the hip cuff. And we're like, wow, you mean you have to move all the muscles in the hip, front, back, side, and back? Yes, you do. But guess what, Shawn, as you well know, probably the most common surgery in America today is a hip replacement.
Yeah.
Because people have lost this understanding that you've got to pay attention to all those muscles through stretching and strengthening. And I say, if you can do the work in the book, you will never need a hip replacement, because hip replacements only happen when people are living in these bodies insidiously and they're not moving them. And then all of a sudden they have pain, and the doctor goes, oh, good Lord, you're bone on bone. How'd that happen? Well, 30 years ago when you fell and that muscle got ticked off and you never did a darn thing about it because you're a man or a woman who's too busy or whatever the case might be. We create these problems for ourselves And doctors go, "Oh, you're just getting older."
Yeah.
I go, "That's not fair." I know too many 80 and 90-year-olds who are kicking it. Now, I don't know more of them that are kicking it than more than are not, because our society is not supporting people to move through their pain and have confidence in their human body, right? So that's why I wrote the book, because in healthcare you can't spend 3 hours talking to patients,
Well,
and
and
sometimes they need that.
yeah, I think, excuse me. I think one of the problems is that we're too quick to give drugs and we're too quick to give surgery. Um,
Yeah,
I had probably a torn rotator cuff or some kind of shoulder injury a couple years ago. It'll be a year ago next month. And I am sure if I went to the right doctor or the wrong doctor, they would have
hmm
told me I needed surgery.
yeah,
And I mean, there was a time where I couldn't lift my shoulder like this, and I couldn't lift anything with any kind of weight. But
yeah,
now it's almost 100%
yeah,
outside because I've moved it. I've kept moving it. I
yeah,
kept,
yep,
trying to trying to keep it mobile, and it's taken some time. And I'm sure as we
absolutely,
age, it takes more time. Um,
absolutely,
but the last thing you want to do is completely quit, immobilize it, and quit moving. I mean,
yeah,
at first, when it's really, really painful, probably don't do that. But work through it a little bit until it gets better and better.
yeah.
Um, and I would just like to know what my results would have been if I would have gotten surgery. Because as you know, you've seen people that have had shoulder surgery, and it's just they're worse off than they were
Well,
before they
you
started.
look at, we need every cell of the body that when we're born, like, okay, here's your full set of necessary items to function well.
Yeah,
And no matter what great surgeon it is, you're always taking tissue away. So you are limiting your capacity to have that full range. And look, sometimes I beg patients, please get this surgery. There is no way out for you. And then we'll strengthen you to the best that we can when we're through. But that doesn't happen too often. However, it does happen. So you were smart to say, I'm in pain. I'm going to stay away from the pain, but I'm not going to stop moving. I'm not going to stop exercising. And I always say, never exercise a painful joint into pain. Always find a way where, like, okay, I'm getting stronger, but I'm not pissing it off. So I'm not pushing
yeah,
myself into pain, because the brain doesn't really like that so much. But one of the things I want to get across to your audience too, Shawn, is that muscle movement is important for sure, but these ligaments, these tissues that go from bone to bone to bone to bone, and if you didn't have ligaments, we would just be, crazy bag of bones falling on the ground.
right.
Ligaments hold them together, and muscles hold them and allow them to stay erect. But ligaments, you can think of a ligament as like a guitar string, super hard, very unpliable. Ligaments creep, they shorten, and they shorten in the direction that our posture puts us in. So when I was saying before, when people are humped over, imagine if I were to stick my hand 4 inches past my heart into my spine, I'd be touching what we call the anterior front longitudinal ligament of the spine. And when we're constantly pulled forward, that ligament over time creeps. It's called ligamentous creep. It shortens. So when I have a 70-year-old who's been kyphotic and, bent over forever, and I say stand up, they're like, oh, you know, they'll come back at the hips, but they can't come back here because those
Ah,
ligaments are so
short.
tight. But
Of
the good news is you can stretch the ligament.
course.
It's not like a muscle. It's not going to change overnight. But I use the roller. I call it gravity assisted ligamentous stretching. I use the roller, and I explain in the book what you're trying to accomplish and which ligament you're trying to change, to just hang out and breathe and be patient. Like, muscles have a certain personality. They'll respond to instant pressure, stretch. Ligaments are kind of like the ornery people in our life. You're not going to change them. You can't make them do whatever you want anytime you want. They'll change, but give me time.
Mhm.
So I do have people use that roller, not in the traditional way of stretching the muscles, but to getting in postures where you are straight.
Yeah.
When I get somebody down on a roller, let's say on their back, and they come in like this, and I put them on the roller, sometimes I have to put a pillow under their head because they can't get that head down yet. But over time, that head will start to come down as all of this starts to open up. It's like, wow, look at you. But does it happen overnight? No. Does it happen? Yes. Do you have to be patient? Yes. So those are the things that I focus on, and I believe in the human body, man. I'm always amazed if you have the right mindset, the right attitude, the right heart, the right support, and a good coach, whether that's a provider or a trainer or something. You're going to make great headway, but you can't do it quickly.
No, I agree. There's no quick fix, quick results. That's for sure. When you got to think about, the person that is kyphotic and they've been that way for 25 years,
Yep.
you're not going to fix them in a week. You're probably not going to fix them in 6 months. I mean, you'll help them some in 6 months, but
Yeah.
it's going to take a few years for the body to remodel and for those ligaments to stretch appropriately.
Yeah.
But there's
But
going to be progress.
and so here's what's frustrating. I got a call yesterday from the insurance guy. Like, you got to quit treating this Medicare patient because you've been treating them 12 times and they're not better. Like, oh, for the love of God, they're old and they have poor posture. And by the way, sir, why is it that you let MDs consistently give cholesterol medications and insulin
Or pain medications every month for this
or pain
person's
medications?
back
Like,
because they're
now
all
look,
hunched over. Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
that's not fair. You got to
Yeah.
play nicely in the sandbox with me because I'm one of those girls that I will go to the insurance commissioner or I will go to the national board, and I'm just about to do that. My gosh, the number of calls I get from insurance companies that are trying to determine what that patient needs. It's so unfair to the person who's paying good dollar for their health care.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you that. I'm lecturing to the expert, but it is frustrating, and more patients need to go, I don't care if insurance covers this or not. It's what I need.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really what needs to happen. And yeah, early on in the show today, you mentioned about um, about having to about how our medical system, I don't remember exactly the details that you said, but basically, our medical system sees these patients chronically. You just kind of alluded to
Hmm.
that again, but they never get better. And I mean, one of the reasons my wife and I got out of traditional pharmacy is because we're given all these medications to these people every month, but yet they never get better. And ultimately, if you find, and that's what I like about chiropractors and good physical therapists,
Yeah, sure.
is that I mean, you as a chiropractor, if you've got a sick patient that is kyphotic and they've been that way for 25 years, you're going to need to see him probably, and I don't know your practice, but a couple times a week at least for months, probably, to help them or to get them better. Um, but ultimately, you shouldn't. Your goal as a chiropractor, along with that patient, should be, you know what? Hey, thanks, doc. I don't need you anymore. You fixed me. I'm healthy now.
Totally.
Right now, there is something to be said about going in once a month or maybe once a couple times a year and getting adjusted and all that. I totally believe in that. Same thing with physical therapy or
Yeah.
massage. But ultimately, if you're having to go in every month for your blood pressure medication or your diabetes medication, and you do this month after month, and you see the doctor and you see a pharmacist, and they add another drug, it's like that should be your clue that I'm not getting better. This is not working for me.
Yeah,
And
I
how are
I
you
know.
feeling?
And
But
it's
yet
I
we
just
do it.
had a
And like you say, we pay billions of dollars for it. Our healthcare system keeps paying for it and paying for it over and over again.
Totally. I just had a patient yesterday actually say, Kelly, you need to stay in your own lane. I said, what are you referring to? You told a friend of mine that she could eat herself out of diabetes. I said, well, she can. Well, she can. It's not type 1. She wasn't born with it
Right.
congenitally. She goes, oh no. My endocrinologist said that is not true and you need to stay in your lane. I go, well, I'm happy to talk to your endocrinologist at any time, but I will not stop telling patients the truth that they're eating themselves into that disease.
Right. They
Period.
ate themselves into the disease. They can eat themselves out of the disease. And of course,
Yes.
we know how
Yes.
we know how evil the system is. And I kind of wonder, it's like sometimes I wonder, is that endocrinologist that ignorant? Are they really
Yeah.
that ignorant? Or are they so bought and paid for and they realize that their income is directly related to keeping these people sick?
Well,
I
I
don't know
think
which
you're
one it is. I mean,
yeah, it's got to be one of the two.
I mean,
But
and either way, in my opinion, it's unethical.
well, I agree. I also think I know because I worked in a medical community for quite a while. I also know that they are given, here's your bandwidth that you can do. You step outside of that, we're coming after you. So I think
Yep,
it's also fear
that's
that they
true.
want to
Yep,
feed their family.
you're right.
I think there's greed, I think there's ignorance, and I think there's fear. The three things that cause us all to behave poorly when we let them overcome us.
Yeah, that is true. They have a set of protocols, usually dictated by the insurance company, which is the standard of care, dictated by the insurance company who colluded with the drug company to make these standards of care. And that's why they stick with them. If you step out of the lane, then you get a complaint against your license and you got to fight for it or lose your license.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's a whole nother conversation, but
it is. And
yeah.
it's just but I still like to bring it up because people need to know the system is a system like that is not going to try to get them better. It's rigged against them. I mean,
Absolutely.
so and people need to know that. But
Absolutely.
unfortunately, some people just trust the system blindly. So I got to ask a couple of questions about your book, and if you get into some stuff.
Sure.
So one of the three principles that we talk about often on our podcast is strength, balance, and mobility.
Hmm.
Those three things, when people really get sick or they fall down or they stop being able to walk, that's when they lose those things.
Yep.
So how does your book address, you already talked about mobility. That was pretty clear with the videos. Does your book address balance at all? I mean, I'm sure it does indirectly, but do you talk about that at all?
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing, balance is a product of movement and strength. And I tell people, you're going to have to exercise into your balance through increased movement and through increased strength. Because look, the reason why a lot of people are so precarious is that they're not having full cardinal ranges of motion on their neck.
Yeah,
They're
right.
terrified of falling. Their calves are too
Yep.
tight. They've been shuffling. They have fallen. They have fear of that. So they actually freeze themselves into poor balance. Now,
Yeah.
on top of it, they're drinking a lot of crap and a lot of sugar and they're not hydrating. And your inner ear definitely needs hydration. Your inner ear needs to experience full ranges of motion where you get those semicircular canals stimulated in every range. So I love, I'm sure we've all heard of the Epley's maneuver, which is what you do to kind of get the fluid moving in your inner ear when you have the benign positional vertigo. But there's actually another really cool stretch where you're on all fours, which is great for older people because the Epley's requires you to kind of hang off of bed. And that can be scary for people like, whoa, but you're on all fours and you take your head into extension and quick rotation and flexion and obliquely you move it quickly. And it's just a nice way to say, all right, I'm gonna give my inner ear semicircular canals a little stimulus. Because look, most of us are just sitting or staring forward or down. And we
Yeah.
rarely, quickly turn our head one direction or the other unless we're frightened. And so we got to move the head, not necessarily to impact the neck, although that's a secondary gain, but to impact the semicircular canals as well.
Yeah. Well, and I guess like you say, and um just by being mobile, that will also increase your strength too, because you can't be mobile if you're not strong.
Yeah, and so the question I often have is, where do I start with this patient? Do I get them more motion, or do I certainly don't start with a strength protocol and somebody who's super, super stiff, but I then start to add strength, like, oh, you're moving a little better. Let's add a little tiny strengthening there, but don't go to pain. And then after fashion, they're more and more mobile. I'm like, oh, now you're doing the full motion with resistance. Good. So you're winning. And I think we have to weave those two things together. Um, and I don't know how often that happens in real life, but that's the goal. That's the goal of what we're trying to accomplish.
So
So,
will you
strength
go
and
ahead?
flexibility. Yeah.
Well, will you ever go to more, I say extreme, but like, so if you're progressing with a patient, and they're doing really well, will you ever go more extreme and say, okay, now that we've got you mobile on two legs, um, you know, do you get them doing any one-legged exercises? Because if you can do it on one leg, if you can walk or
Yes.
jump on one leg, you can't walk on one leg, but if you can jump on one leg, then you're not gonna have a problem walking. I mean, that's
That's
for
right.
sure.
Oh,
So
most definitely. I mean, that's just that next tier of difficulty.
yeah,
We have a vibration plate. I'll put people on a vibe plate where they're holding on and then stand on one leg and stand on another leg. And they're not afraid of falling, but they also got this perturbation happening in their feet. The brain's like, whoa, whoa, what's happening? What's happening? But it gets used to that, and you train yourself into that not being so scary, let's say. So that's definitely one thing. But I love the one-legged activity, supported and then non-supported, eyes open, eyes closed, just making it
yeah.
more difficult.
Well,
Yeah.
when you think about doing those things, like we're talking about falling, it's like, and when you if you can jump on one leg, or you can balance on one leg, or you can do it with your eyes closed, and then you're out hiking on a trail, and then all of a sudden you trip over a root and you weren't ready for it,
You
your
can,
body can respond to
yeah,
that fall. And you might fall, you might not fall.
right.
Um, because your body can respond appropriately because you've done that stuff before. So
Yeah.
it's so important to stay mobile, and to maybe do things that you wouldn't normally do. Like, my coach prescribes one-legged box jumps. Um,
Yeah. And
he
those are
doesn't.
so awesome and super hard,
They are,
but you
but
can get there if you properly crescendo, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
And here's the thing that I will tell people is, like, if you can do a one-legged box jump, you're not going to have a problem. You're not going to have a problem walking.
that's
And
right.
that's our goals. We want to stay mobile the rest of our lives. So do
Absolutely.
one-legged box jumps as long as you can. Maybe your height will get lower and lower,
Right.
but keep doing them.
Who cares?
You
Yeah,
know,
I had a goal probably 5 years ago to be able to do 5 pull-ups. And, poor girl, that's pretty good. And so now I do them every day, but it took me about a year,
yeah,
laying on the ground, hanging onto the ropes and pulling myself up. And then I
yeah,
would be on my feet, pulling myself up. And then I'd be using the cheater things, pulling myself up. So it was just this crescendo to get there. I'm like, yeah, it just took a year. That's all.
yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kelly, I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to stream your book one more time, and I
Okay.
want you to tell us what you have a passion for.
I have a passion for empowering people to believe they can get their health back. Number one, really, no, not just hoping, but believing. And then I have another passion, and that is the world is so divisive today. 5 years ago, I started something called Conversations That Connect, and I get people in a room who have very, very volatile, very disparate perspectives about anything from politics to vaccines to pronoun use, etc. And I teach people the art of having a conversation to understand them, to understand their why, and not try to change them, not try to persuade them, just to get them, and it is the most beautiful process. It takes about 2 hours. I teach it on a regular basis, and I teach people how to prepare for conversations like that with friends, family, church people, boards, etc., etc. And when I see people who are like, "Rawr, I hate people who like this guy," or whatever, and at the end of their conversation they hug and cry, like, okay, you guys just created common ground. That to me
Yeah.
is super exciting. And um, as I move into a part-time practice, maybe next year, I'll maybe do 3 days a week. I'll have more time for the teaching of that, and it is a blast. It's so not scary. It's so fun, and I've never had anybody be mad, sad, or walk out. So I love. I guess I lean into conflict because I know if you use certain strategies, you're going to get through to the other side.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I would love to take that course. I could probably learn a lot. That's for sure. Especially when it comes to getting along with family,
Yeah.
So, Kelli, as we wind this podcast up, if anybody has any question, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Actually, at this point, we're reconfiguring strategies around that because um, we're putting in a whole new electronic health record in the office, and wow. So at this point, I'm pulling back and just saying, do my personal email, which is K Pearson, Pearson DC, as you see on the screen, at mac.com. I'm one of those original Macintosh users.
Yeah, that's an old email, I'm
It's a
sure.
very old email, but I'm loyal to that company because I think it's
That must become because you were from the San Bernardino Valley, right?
well, my husband was, and he's the one that turned me on. But once you have a Mac, to get a PC is kind of like sacrilegious.
Yeah, and I will say this is totally off subject, but I was and still am a PC guy as far as our computers. And I not worship Microsoft, but I really believed in Microsoft. And my first smartphone was a Windows phone because I lived and died by Outlook and all their
Yes.
programs. And I'm like, I am not going to get a phone unless it integrates well with Microsoft stuff. So
Right.
I got a Windows phone and it was a piece of junk. And I was at the store to buy another one. And I still remember him. He's still a friend of mine today. He's like, Shawn, just get the iPhone. Just get the iPhone. Trust me, get the iPhone. I'm like, it's not going to integrate with my Outlook and blah, blah, blah. Well, it totally did. And, now I have one. My wife has one. My kids have one. And we love our iPhones, and we'll probably be iPhone people the rest of our lives. I believe iPhone
You
makes a
know,
very good product.
we can all change, and it's not about being right. It's just I love when people can change their ideologies because it makes sense to, or they're going to try something they've said they never would, or
Yeah,
I love human flexibility,
that's
both
awesome.
both mentally and physically.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. You
Yes,
helped us realize our goal, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So I really appreciate you, Kelli. Thank you so much.
indeed. Thank you, Shawn. I appreciate it. And say hi to Janet.
Yep. And listeners and viewers, thank you so much for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune into our regularly scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time Monday. Thank you for tuning in.